The people of Afghanistan are going through the darkest moments once in a generation, now as the country is facing economic, security and humanitarian crisis. Ever since the Taliban group seized power in Afghanistan, it started pushing Afghan people back in time. They have systematically erased women from public life. Establishing a Stone Age regime with barbaric laws, they are reversing decades of Afghan people's achievement. Recently, the UN Rights Chief, Volker Turf, during his speech at the UN Human Rights Council, stated that the human rights in Afghanistan were in a state of collapse, accusing the Taliban of a shocking level of oppression of women and girls. The Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan in August 2021 marked a significant decline in the nation's human rights landscape. They imposed harsh restrictions on freedom of expression and assembly, using violence to suppress dissent. However, one of the most alarming consequences of their rule has been the devastating impact on women and girls. Many girls were forced out of school and now face early marriages. Women lost jobs and struggled to support their families. Some were attacked for opposing the Taliban and forced to flee. Experts see these actions as violations of international law and human rights, impacting the physical and mental health of women and girls. UN Rights Chief Volker Turf recently described Afghanistan's human rights as collapsing, citing shocking levels of oppression against women and girls by the Taliban.
Human rights in Afghanistan are in a state of collapse, acutely affecting the lives of millions of women, men, girls and boys. Violations of human rights in the country are not new. Decades of armed conflict mean that Afghanistan has known violence and injustice for much of its recent history. But the dynamic imposed by the Taliban since they took power 2 years ago constitutes a systematic assault on the rights and freedoms of the population, which particularly targets women and girls and excludes them from most aspects of public and daily life. The shocking level of oppression of Afghan women and girls is immeasurably cruel. Afghanistan has set a devastating precedent as the only country in the world where women and girls are denied access to secondary and higher education. Restrictions are becoming increasingly severe, quelling women and girls' fundamental freedoms, effectively confining them to the four walls of their homes, to invisibility.
The Taliban's return and the dissolution of the previous republic on August 15, 2021 rolled back progress in protecting human rights and free society values. This particularly affected women and vulnerable groups, sparking serious concerns about the current human rights situation. Over the past 2 decades, Afghanistan made significant strides in human rights, democracy, gender equality, education, healthcare, and inclusivity. It served as a regional example with a thriving media landscape and open discourse. However, ever since their return, uncertainty prevails, raising fears of human rights violations for activists, former government employees, women, and minorities. Under the Taliban rule, extrajudicial killings are widespread, targeting former government associates, armed group members, and those not following Taliban rules.
And over the past 2 years, there has been a systematic erosion of the laws and institutions that once provided some protection for human rights. The constitution has been suspended, and laws are now made by edicts rather than through consultative processes. Laws that once provided a framework for the protection of women from violence or an enabling environment for media have been suspended. Corporal punishments and public executions have resumed, and there are ongoing reports of extrajudicial killings, torture and ill treatment as well as arbitrary arrests and detentions. Despite repeated statements by the de facto authorities regarding the general amnesty, we continue to document human rights violations against individuals affiliated with the former government and its security forces.
Afghanistan faces grave difficulties, with Taliban rulers ignoring world leaders' demands and instead blaming the West for the country's challenges. The Taliban group refused to acknowledge that a more moderate ideology could have led to a better situation in Afghanistan.